And here we are again. A whole nother week has gone by, and if your neighborhood was anything like mine, it was nothing but wall-to-wall fireworks from about 9:30 in the evening to, I don't know, midnight. So anyway, thanks for coming. You are all channel supporters. Some of you send money for some odd reason now and then, and I'm really, really grateful. It helps things like glasses and teeth, and maybe someday I'll get hearing aids. Those are really expensive. But for now, everybody has to put up with my bad hearing. And we're going to talk about a bunch of things here. We got a bunch to go over, but trying to stay mainly on the topic of this deception and things going on right now. But I want to start out with a couple of things that don't seem like they would be on that topic. But it all has to do with the big elephant in the room all the time is, okay, we're in the age of deception, but what do we do about it? And I decided to bring up Ephesians 6. And hey, Pillbox, I didn't shout everybody out, but I think I said hi to most of you in the chat before we got started. So, hey, Lane and Pillbox have shown up since then. So I'm going to start out with Ephesians 6:10 to 18, the armor of God, and then James 4:7. So this is important as a backdrop to what I'm going to do. And like I said, I got a bunch of links to look at today and some history, because you can't know what's going on if you don't know how you got there. I mean, it just makes you crippled to deal with things if you don't know any history. And I know history is written by the victors, but on the other hand, if you read the histories of both sides of a conflict, then you get a better idea of what's really happened. So let's get started with Ephesians 6 here, the armor of God. Be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. So don't go to battle without any battle gear. Don't go to battle in your jammies. That's the problem, and it's what makes us afraid, is if we forget to do that. And it says, in verse 12, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, authorities, powers of the dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. This is not just people. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground after you have done everything to stand. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist. The belt holds everything else together. Okay, so it wouldn't matter you put all that armor on you if you just take a step and it all falls off. What good is that? So without truth, you don't have a chance, even if you think you've collected all the right armor. And then we have the breastplate, or it's really body armor. It's covered both the front and back of the torso. You know, you've seen that in movies and whatnot about the old Roman Empire, where they had two leather straps that held the front and back piece together, and they put that over somebody's head. That's what that is, that part. And it's made of righteousness when we come into spiritual battle. So if you're living in sin or pushing the edge of it, you know, seeing what you can get away with, you're not really going to battle with your vital organs protected. And then it says in verse 15, your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. That is to say, willing to spread what you believe and not just keep it to yourself. And then verse 16, in addition to all this, take up the shield of faith. This is the Greek word is a full body size shield, not just a little one, the little circle Captain America shield. This is a full body riot gear shield. And it says that it extinguishes all the flaming arrows of the evil one. And this is made of faith. So faith in what? Just faith? No, it's trust in God. That's the kind of faith that acts as a shield. And then on top of that, you have the helmet of salvation itself. And, you know, all anybody has to do is a headshot and you're gone if you don't have a helmet on. And you can't have that helmet without trusting God. And then we've got one weapon, one offensive weapon, the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. And this is something that few Christians go out to battle with. They may be well protected. They may have all the armor in place, but without the offensive weapon, why are they on the battlefield? This is something that has been, I've talked about it many times before, that Christians are unprepared in many ways, but especially in not having any idea how to wield the sword. And then, of course, pray in the Spirit on all occasions, and be alert, and always keep on praying for the Lord's people. And then James 4:7 Submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. So if the devil isn't fleeing from you, there's some way in which you're not resisting, or you don't have the armor or whatever. So I'm going to get to Psalm 2 here in a second, but this is just kind of a preliminary because it's frightening times. But it's kind of like having insurance against, if something happens to your car or somebody breaks into your house. If you have insurance, if you have a half decent deductible, you're not going to be out much money, and it gives you peace. It may be a waste of money if nothing bad ever happens to you, which is great, but it gives you peace, and that's what the armor of God does too. It gives you peace so that you aren't afraid, because there's no reason to be. It doesn't mean bad things won't happen. It doesn't mean battle is stressful. It just means that you won't be killed, which is to say lose your soul. So, but before I get to the next scriptures, I want us to look at a link about the hidden hand, because in all this crazy evil chaos in the world right now, few people are paying attention to this. And what this means, first of all, is what we got an example here, Illuminati symbols. Let me put that in the chat, because I forgot to. Sometimes I give Chow the link ahead of time so he can look up things, but I didn't have a nice presentation ready this time. I just had a bunch of links mainly. So there's one of them. This is about the hidden hand. You can see Ted Cruz here has his hand tucked inside his vest, which is kind of odd, especially since nobody else did it in that picture. And we have the same thing with Joseph Stalin, George Washington. This is part of the Masonic signs and symbols, and it's about keeping secrets and not letting one hand know what the other hand's doing. Now that phrase, not letting the left hand know what the right hand's doing, is from Jesus himself, actually, because he said that when it comes to giving, you should be so discreet about it, as opposed to bragging about it, that not even your left hand knows what your right hand's doing. It wasn't meant to deceive. It was meant to not bring undue attention upon yourself. But the Masons, of course, have twisted this into keeping secrets, deadly secrets. And they said the hand sign is the 7th degree of York Rite, the Royal Arch degree. And then we also have Napoleon, always is known for his picture of his hand in his vest. French military general, of course. And then we have Karl Marx, Bavarian Illuminati Baron von Niga, or something, however you pronounce that. And we have Nietzsche, as the saying goes. Nietzsche is infamous for saying God is dead. Well, there's somebody a long time ago had a billboard up that said Nietzsche is dead, signed God. Nietzsche is obviously dead and God is not. So anyway, he was one of those hidden hand people. So anything you want to know about the hidden hand, there's that link I just gave you guys. So we're going to get into that other thing there that just popped up. But this misdirection and confusion and chaos is done for the same reason a magician does it, to divert attention away from the hand that's actually performing the trick. That's the idea of the negative use of the hidden hand. And so this is a diversion. And so when we see, what's being shown to us is that reason and order are openly being destroyed now. So we should be paying attention to what we aren't meant to see. So what is their real target? That's what Psalm 2, 1-4 is about. Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together. Notice this is the kings and the rulers rising up against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their chains and throw off their shackles. But the one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. I could go on, obviously, but that's Psalm 2 saying what the hidden hand is all about. It's all about this spiritual battle that I start out with. That's one of the reasons I start out with Ephesians 6 about the armor of God and resisting the devil, and from James. And this is what they're up to. This is their end game. Okay, this is to throw off God. It was the same end game of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the same thing with the fallen angels that brought on the flood, the same with them, that God had to hide what he was doing as far as when Jesus came, because as the New Testament says, If they had known what was coming, they wouldn't have done it, and it had to be done. And ever since then, the devil has tried to destroy the Jews so the Messiah couldn't come. He just tried to destroy mankind so the Jews couldn't come. He keeps failing, but he keeps doing things every step of the way to try to thwart God's plans. And that's why the whole world is in upheaval and chaos right now, because they see an opportunity that they've groomed and prepared for many generations coming to fruition. They've been dumbing people down, pushing God out of the public square, making sure that anything decent and holy is done away with, that anybody who tries to have some kind of moral standards is thought backwards at best. And now probably it's getting to the point where you're an enemy of the state, and the state, make no mistake about it, is Marxist. That's what the world is becoming, and what the U.S. is on the verge of becoming right now is a Marxist state. And what is the goal of Marxism? You can ask Marx, you can ask any of those people. They hate God. That's the bottom line of all of it. So this is telling us back in, before the time of Christ, what the end game is. That's not the only portion of Scripture doing that, of course, but they want to eliminate the one true God, and anyone who still holds to any sort of decency, whether they're a theist or not. And that's what we see here in 2 Timothy 3, 1-9. There will be terrible times in the last days. Listen to this list and see if it doesn't describe our current generation. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, aka spirituality in quotes, but denying its power, have nothing to do with such people. And I have it up all in NIV for convenience, but on my translation I bring out the next part is not about gullible women. That's a mistranslation, a deliberate one by all the English translations I've seen. It means people who will follow anyone. That's what the phrase meant in Greek. People who are gullible and will follow anyone. And that's what we have to keep track of also of who is the object of the sentence here too, which is saying that they are people of depraved minds. They are the kind who worm their way into homes and gain control over gullible people. So if you want to learn, if you want to see how I understand the Greek in that section, go ahead and read my translation of it. But the point right now is not to get deep into that grammar there, but to say that this describes our world, okay? And this is what the Bible predicted. This is the end game. This is what they want, is to get rid of anything decent and holy. And above all, it's always about money, meaning the bankers finance all sides of wars in order to profit and control. If you ever watched this, I think it was the second Sherlock Holmes movie with Morton Downey Jr., they're actually good movies, but the second one where he meets up with Moriarty is, there's a phrase in there where Moriarty says bullets and bandages. He was financing both sides, trying to finance both sides of war. And they thwarted him in that. But of course, in real life, that's what has always happened for the longest time. And the British Empire in particular did what they were doing when it came to the American Revolution was what worked best for them at the time, because they were stretched very far. It wasn't about America's patriots overturning the British Empire. It was more about what was expedient at the time for the British Empire, and it's a lot more complicated than that, but they saw that they would benefit more from an independent nation to do business with than by trying to control them as a colony. So let's remember that people in general, and Christians in particular, have never been very good at recognizing when the pot of water the frog is sitting in is getting even slightly warmer. The analogy of the frog slowly boiled. It will not jump out because the change is too gradual, and it eventually dies. And this is what's going on, this long-term strategy. And in the U.S. in particular, the first fire was lit from the start, actually, during that Revolutionary War in the 1700s. And if we want to look at what all the things that were going on at that time, that is this. Oops, come on, give me the link so I can post that in the chat. How the British won the American Revolutionary War. Why am I going over this? Because it's the backdrop, the historical setting of a lot of things that we've gotten wrong because we were told wrong by the victors without really looking at all the sides of an issue. And what I'm doing is showing steps. Okay, this is just the first step. I'm not going to spend the whole video on this, but this is the first step of this long-term plan of deception. At least as far as, I live in America, so I know what's going on here, but I'm using it as an example of the kind of long-term strategy that the forces of evil use. And you can check the link out yourself. It's very long, you can see. Well, maybe you can't see the scroll bar. I probably have that off the screen, but it's a tiny little box of a scroll bar. This goes on for quite a while. I think there's comments at the end. But you can see all the things that were going on with France and Spain and all these other factors that were stretching the British Empire too thin. Of course, that's their own fault, but still, they were stretched thin when it came to the American conflict. And in the end, the agreement at the end, was not so much about you guys beat us at guerrilla warfare as it was we think that we can do better in the long run by doing business with you as opposed to trying to micromanage you. Of course, that micromanagement never went away. I think I've got some more links about that here, but this is a long, long account. This is the kind of thing you read if you really want to know the truth, because people just hand-wave dismiss these things. And yet people do research and look these things up, and not everyone is a biased researcher. So, and in order to prove that, if we make the charge that somebody is biased, we have to prove it. We can't just say you're biased, okay? We have to have some evidence. So you can read the whole story here, and I'm just flying through this because I don't intend to read it to you, about the Treaty of Paris and a bunch of other things that went on that showed that things are not always as cut and dried as we think. And by the way, the phrase is cut and dried, not cut and dry. That's the way it always started out as, because I'm old enough to remember. But anyway, all these factors, and then they have, half of this, we're only halfway scrolled through here, and they've got footnotes and discussion at the end. So check that out on, what I think is a good account of all the complexity of the situation, because it'll help us understand how we got where we are. Okay? Now, when it comes to the boiling frog analogy, the next major increase in temperature was, of course, the American Civil War, and we are in the middle of one right now, whether anybody will admit it or not, because violence is being done, and this is just because the common people haven't fought back yet doesn't mean we're not in a civil war. Okay, we are. But the one in the 1860s had really less to do with slavery than with economics and states' rights. And so for this, you can, let me get another article out. Let me put that up first, and then this is actually a forum. And unfortunately, it doesn't scale well, so I won't be able to show the text large enough for you to look at, but here's the link. Anyway, you can look at all these statements and arguments, and people discuss it back and forth. For example, maybe I'll just kind of read through this one real quick. I'm not going to read all the discussion afterwards, but it says he's reading actually somebody else's document here, and says the Civil War of 1860 through 65. People think it was fought over slavery. Nothing could be farther from the truth. It began because the South demanded states' rights, and we're not getting them. We are essentially the people who still value the American Constitution are on the side of what the South was in the first Civil War. And the Congress was heavily favoring the industrialized northern states. Industry is what really decided that war. But the thing is that states should have had rights. They were independent states. They were not a corporation at that time. And yeah, it's a good comment in the chat that the South actually, in a way, and it's complicated, won the Civil War, and Germany won World War II. We know that. And Britain won just let us have independence pretty much. But the other activities that happened served as a nice cover story, and there's purposes for those cover stories. Remember the hidden hand. So let me get back to here. The Congress also taxed the finished materials that northern industries produced heavily, making finished products that the South wanted unaffordable. The Civil War should not have occurred if the northern states and their representatives in Congress had only listened to the problems of the South and stopped those practices that were almost like taxation without representation that Great Britain had done to the U.S. colonies. Well, they weren't called U.S., but then the southern states would not have seceded and the war would not have occurred. So they were turning a deaf ear, the Congress was, because they were in the pockets of lobbyists from heavy industry in the North. They were turning a deaf ear to what these unfair trade practices were doing to the South, and that's mostly what it was about. Okay, most Southerners, I'm skipping a little bit, most Southerners did not even own slaves. In fact, most Northerners did not, even fewer Northerners did. Some did, but a small percentage of Americans actually ever owned any slave, a very small percentage. And yet all of us today are being blamed for a systemic slavery, which was never true. So anyway, let me go back down to here. Most were small farmers who worked their farms with their families. They were fighting for their rights. They were fighting to maintain their lifestyle and their independence the way they wanted to without the U.S. government dictating to them how they should behave. Does that sound familiar? History repeats itself because people don't learn from history. In fact, even some so-called awake people, I hate to use the term woke, that's been co-opted, but conspiratorial, quote-unquote, people who think they know everything just hand-wave dismiss the stuff, and that's why they're doomed to repeat it. That's why they don't see this stuff coming, because they won't look at what happened before and learn a lesson from it. So, why are we frequently taught going on here that the Civil War, the War of Northern Aggression, War between the states, or whatever you want to call it, was solely about slavery? That's because the history books are usually written by the winners, the victors. And this war was won by the Union. However, following my family around since I was just a year old to Civil War living history scenarios in Gettysburg and elsewhere, listen to both sides of the story from people portraying both Union and Confederate soldiers, and reading books, the official records of the Civil War, all bunch of books, come to the conclusion that the Civil War was about much more than abolishing the institution of slavery. Certainly that was an important thing, but as I've gone over before in a document called Sound Familiar, the abolition of slavery had more to do with mainly Christian women trying to impose their moral standards on the rest of society. And it eventually worked, and now it's taken as for granted, but it took a lot of brave people to stand up against that. But as I learned in an earlier video that I think one of my brothers sent me this morning, I think it was that one where they said the turnaround from having slaves to not having slaves in any country was never faster than it was in the United States. So today we're being unfairly blamed for being racist. We are the least racist country. There isn't a country in the world that has never had racism. So the whole point of all this is that even though history is written by the victors, you can get to both sides by listening to both sides, and that, sometimes the victor goes the other way. Things change over time. So the point is that history should not be ignored, or we will be doomed to repeat it as we're doing today. So, but yeah, I did mention economy, Walter, a little bit ago about money and, mainly about states' rights. But slavery was a partial issue. It certainly wasn't the only issue. That's what I meant to convey there. So states' rights were put down in the end, and people, when they get control, don't want to let go of it. We know that. But you would think that would have been enough, but there was another time the temperature that the the pot the frog is in had to be turned up again. And that happened not very long after the Civil War. Let's go to this link, the Act of 1871, and let me put that there. The Act of 1871, the United States is a corporation. There are two constitutions, okay? Since the Act of 1871, which established the District of Columbia, which had been living under the all caps United States Corporation, which is owned by certain international bankers and the aristocracy of Europe and Britain. This is why we know we didn't win the war. Andrew Jackson, I think it was, if I don't have my names mixed up, tried to thwart the international bankers, the foreign bankers, and he succeeded for a while, but after his death, of course, they came roaring back, and we have this abominable act that essentially overthrew the United States and made it a subsidiary of the Bank of England and the other international bankers, such as the Rothschilds and all those people. Congress changed the name of the original Constitution by changing one word, and people don't understand that one word or two words difference in any legal document do make the critical difference, but Congress has known and does know this. They are traitors. They betrayed the entire country, and they did this. They signed it on Christmas Eve when most of the congressmen were home for Christmas, and snuck it in the back door. This is a Masonic thing to do. This is the hidden hand. Well, everybody's thinking, we're just forming our new nation and we're putting things together. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, they're as corrupt as they could be. They have been the whole time, and this is the sort of thing they were doing. So, with no constitutional authority to do so, Congress creates a separate form of government for the District of Columbia, a 10-mile square parcel of land. The act passed when the country was weakened and financially depleted in the aftermath of the Civil War. It was a strategic move by foreign interest. So, that's when it was bought and sold. After the Revolutionary War, the Civil War was allowed and fostered so that the United States would be weak and in debt and need the bankers to bail them out. This is one of the factors that this is, it can't be ignored. This is what the hidden hand was doing. Yes, slavery was a significant part of it, but certainly that's the part we saw. What I'm trying to emphasize is the part we didn't see, so that we can learn to recognize when we're being fed something, and being distracted, like a dog seeing a squirrel, okay? And it says the Constitution of the United States of America is the Constitution of the Incorporated United States of America. So what they said was the title was capitalized and the word for was changed to of. Did you see that? Constitution of. The Constitution for is what it was originally. It operates in an economic capacity and has been used to fool the people into thinking it governs the republic. It does not. D.C. has no authority over the rest of the country. And most people don't know that. Capitalization is not insignificant when referring to a legal document. This seemingly minor alteration has had a major impact on every subsequent generation of Americans. What Congress did was to create an entirely new document, a constitution for the government of the District of Columbia, an incorporated government. This newly altered constitution was not intended to benefit the Republic. It benefits only the corporation of the United States of America, and operates entirely outside the original organic constitution. Instead of having absolute and unalienable, people say unalienable, but it's unalienable, that means you can't take them away, rights guaranteed under the organic constitution, well, really guaranteed by God, we the people now have relative rights or privileges. One example is the sovereign's right to travel, which has now been transformed under corporate government policy into a privilege that requires citizens to be licensed. That's why you need a driver's license. If you were free, you wouldn't need a license. That's what they're saying. So, Congress committed treason against the people who were sovereign under the grants and decrees of the Declaration of Independence and the Organic Constitution. And it's been operating as a treasonous entity ever since. This was a coup. The overthrow of the original U.S. Constitution, the wholesale robbery of the American people, making everyone from that point on a debt slave to the international bankers. In fact, as a lot of you know, our birth certificates are really guarantors of a collateral for a debt. Now let me get a link up for that one, in case anybody's unfamiliar with it. This is a long link. Hopefully, I should have gone and got tiny URL, but sometimes those don't work. Anyway, the true Democratic Party, as you know, democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding on what's for dinner, whereas a republic is based on principles that are time-honored and universal, such as don't kill, don't take other people's belongings, what we would consider basic givens, and you stick to those principles. So they talk here about the certificate of birth and all the reasons why it's a certificate guaranteeing the payment of a debt. We are owned by the corporation, not legally, but by the hidden hand. And that's what a birth certificate is all about. Okay? It means you have been bonded as a slave. And again, I'm not going to read the whole article. I'm just giving you the links so you can check this out later yourself, about being registered, security bond, guarantor, a person who pledges collateral for the contract of another, but separately as a part of an independent contract with the obligee of the original contract. That's a law dictionary definition of what a guarantor is, and that's what each one of us is made to be before we even leave the hospital when we're born. So this again, you can read through this and check it out for yourself. And by the way, the IRS, any sort of revenue service for the international bankers, is simply the muscle for, in the U.S. at least, the Fed, which is neither federal nor reserve, who issues debt certificates in place of actual currency. All your American money says good for all debts, public and private. It doesn't say exchangeable for so much gold or silver, as it used to be. I used to have a silver certificate I got for my birthday or Christmas one year when I was real little, and then it disappeared. Somebody took it. I don't know who took it. I kept it hidden in my dresser drawer, and one day I opened the little envelope and it was gone. That's all I know. So anyway, there are silver certificates from back when they actually were money, but the Fed, in the act of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, robbed us all at the stroke of a pen by taking the real money of the United States and loaning it back to us at interest with Federal Reserve debt notes, which we have to pay with real labor, pay the interest, which is only created out of nothing when somebody takes out a loan. That's why complaints about national debt are a farce, because the whole fractional reserve banking system requires ever-increasing, exponentially increasing debt. And the balloon will pop. And when it does, they will have acquired even more wealth, and they'll start over with some new currency, which is, again, fractional reserve lending, predatory lending. And it's the game of musical chairs starts all over again. And every time there's another round of it, the people lose. That's what's going on with all this. That's what's been behind the scenes. And we're trapped in it. As long as we're using their game token money, we can't complain about what they do with it, can we? So, just looking at chat real quick. Sorry, birth certificate equals slavery certificate. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I've heard too that you can look up your social security number on the New York Stock Exchange, that you are traded as a commodity and you're all worth millions. We are all worth millions, but I have never been able to confirm that, but that's what I've been told. So, knowing all of this, should it come as any surprise that the whole world is in the condition it's in? Remember what we started out reading about the plans of the evil ones. Because evil, as I said, lays its plans many generations in advance, because the frog won't jump out of the water if it's seeded gradually. And in fact, the complacent frogs, the snowflakes we call them today, will snap at any other frogs who try to jump out, especially at the earliest signs of an increase in temperature. So here we are in a boiling pot full of frogs who demand to be eaten, pretty much, all by great deception. And anyone who thinks, knowing all that, if you know all that a people's revolution will accomplish what the armies of the nations never could, is deluded. This is not just people storming the castle with torches and pitchforks. They don't have it, as I've said before. It used to be that armies of the world didn't really have that much more tech than the average farmer, who had pitchforks and other sharp implements for farming that they could use effectively against polished swords and whatnot. But now, what do they have? They've got UFOs. They've got weapons that can beam thoughts into your head. They have 5G, they have chemtrails, they have sound cannons, a gazillion high-tech ways of weaponizing just about anything against you that you can't stand against. And it's foolhardy and in denial to think that the common people can rise up against that. Now let me read you this thing about Carol Quigley. This is the Quigley formula from I had copied it on my website because I don't like things like that to be disappeared off the internet. And it's here under the Quigley formula. Let me get you the link. And it says the CFR, is the Council on Foreign Relations, embraces members of both American political parties. It's not a partisan organization. The voters are led to believe that by choosing between Democrat and Republican parties, they have a choice. They think they're participating in their own political destiny, but that is an illusion. To a collectivist like Professor Quigley, it is a necessary illusion to prevent the voters from meddling into the important affairs of state. It's a show. It's the hand you see. If you have ever wondered why the two American parties appear so different at election time but so similar afterward, listen carefully to Quigley's approving overview of American politics. And this is exactly what's going on. What a lot of people are just finally noticing is that no matter what the leftists do, the conservatives stand and watch. The ones who have the power to do something. They talk, but they don't do, for the most part. This is a quote from Carol Quigley's book, Tragedy and Hope. The national parties and their presidential candidates, with the Eastern establishment assiduously fostering the process behind the scenes, moved closer together and nearly met in the center with almost identical candidates and platforms, although the process was concealed as much as possible by the revival of obsolescent or meaningless war cries and slogans, often going back to the Civil War. The argument that the two parties should represent opposed ideals and policies, one perhaps of the right and the other of the left, is a foolish idea acceptable only to the doctrinaire and academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical so that the American people can, quote, throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extreme shifts in policy. Either party in office becomes in time corrupt, tired, unenterprising, and vigorless. Then it should be possible to replace it every 4 years, if necessary, by the other party, which will be none of those things, but will still pursue with renewed vigor approximately the same basic policies. And then, of course, we have a quote from Woodrow Wilson, of all people. Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the U.S. in the field of commerce and manufacturing are afraid of somebody, afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. He was one of them, but just so was Carol Quigley. And they're telling you what the hidden hand is doing. Okay? But, as depressing as all that sounds, let's go, and let me get, let's see, we want to go to 1 Thessalonians 2. Let me just go back up here and get that. And 1 Thessalonians, it's easier to read than say. 1 Thessalonians 2, 6 to 12. We already talked about the armor of God, but it says, neither did we try to get people to exalt us, not you or anyone else. We could have been a burden to you as ambassadors or apostles. We were kind to you and working night and day. And all this is kind of the backdrop of what kind of people these were. And then I think it's 2 Thessalonians is about God paying them back. It's about the restrainer, and God is going to send them his own hidden hand. You see what I'm saying? You know what is holding, starting in verse 6, about the Antichrist, basically. You know what's holding him back for now, so that he's only revealed in his time. The secret of lawlessness, or it means secret, not mystery, is already in operation, but only after the restrainer is taken out of the way that the lawless one will be revealed. So our departure / rapture is first, and then the lawless one is revealed. He will come when the adversary, Jesus will come when the adversary, Satan, is at the height of his power, which he held by means of signs and fake miracles and seduction. This injustice will all have been done to those who are dying because they would not love the truth that would save them. As a result, here is the crux of it, God will send them in the wrong direction, so they will believe the lie. And in this way, all who rejected the truth and celebrated injustice will be condemned. So God is going to send, what it means is a misdirection in the Greek, like changing road signs. Okay? He's going to change the road signs to everyone who hated the truth. Remember that Psalm 2 that we read about people conspiring against God? This is what God is going to do to them. So knowing that it's always been with the powers that be, the deep state, it's always been about money as a means of control, we can speculate that God's deception for them will be something to do with what they can't resist. A chance to become not only even richer and more powerful, but to also make the world so disgustingly evil that everyone will hate God. And the way part of that's going to happen, the linchpin, as I've said before, the linchpin of prophecy, is the departure of the body of Christ from the earth. And so when that pin is pulled, they will rush into the trap of being given what they always demanded, which is an evil world that hates God. So when it comes to things like the age or shape of the earth, those are actually smaller issues in that regard, because their purpose will be to sell the cover story of the mass disappearance of Christians, both dead and living, because it isn't just the alive Christians who will be taken. It will be every Christian who has ever lived. Many, most of whom are in history have already died, of course, and they're still in the ground. Their bodies will be gone, and this will open the door. The vacuum will be filled with a headlong rush into the kingdom that Satan always wanted overtly. A linchpin, by the way, is when it's a cylinder with a little ring in one end, and you put it through, like sometimes if you have like a bicycle with a child's seat on the back, the child's seat, like a stroller that hooks to the back of a bike. Let me see if I'm pretty sure I could find a picture of a linchpin here. Just to give you an idea what I'm talking about. If nobody knows what that is, let me get images. There's a linchpin. Okay, that ring just flips over this way. You put it through something, and then you put a lock on it, and that pin holds the two parts together. So if you pull that pin, the back of the bicycle is going to go, you'll keep riding, and the little kid in the stroller part will just slow down and stop. And so pulling the linchpin means something is let go, okay? So what it means prophetically is that we, as the body of Christ, Christians, are the linchpin that holds back the complete, unfettered, off-the-rails satanic kingdom from taking shape. That's why it's taken so long, but this is by God's power, not ours. And God will send them a great deception, and people think that this is going to be something like earth shape or whatever it is, but that's small change compared to what's coming, and it will fool everyone. And as a lot of us have speculated, that this may take the form, the cover stories, as something like an alien invasion, which we've all heard of Project Bluebeam and the fake alien invasion hologram, and also any other religious background that people have that are still there will accept as some kind of ascension, or the Space Brothers came from another dimension to take out the people who are holding us back, and blah, blah, blah. All these different stories will be offered for explaining the disappearance. And but besides the rapture itself, the story being covered is mankind's open, overt, blatant corruption, as we can all see now bubbling to the surface. And it's just to spite God. Back to Psalms 2 again. And as Jesus said, with the days of Noah and Lot, the world is ripe for the wrath of God. And our purpose in the meantime as Christians is to spread the gospel, going back to that full armor of God. So fewer people will have to suffer that. So let's look up a few more verses here. Let me go to my reference list and go get those. And if I don't put double commas in here, I won't find them because I just, don't have Google's resources to do a search. But anyway, this is what the gospel is. This is how you put on the armor. This is the helmet of salvation and the shield of faith. 1 Corinthians 15:2. Actually, to start with verse 3, what I first handed over to you is what I too had accepted, that the anointed, the Christ, died for our failures or sins according to the writings or scriptures, that he was buried, and that he was raised the third day according to the writings. That's prophecy. That's why it's important. And then 2 Corinthians 5:20, we are the anointed's representatives, and God pleads through us. So on behalf of the anointed, we plead with you to be reconciled to God. Ephesians 1:13, likewise for you who heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation, you were believed and were sealed with the promised Holy Spirit. So we should be in the business of spreading the gospel. This is it on the screen. And trying to convince as many people as possible to reconcile with God before his wrath is rained down, and not be deceived by all the stuff that's going on. So salvation is simply an offer of adoption as God's children by faith in the Jesus who rose from the dead, period. And that's it. That's how you put on the armor of God. That's how you stand against evil. It doesn't mean nothing bad will happen to you. It just means that spiritually you are safe. And that when we trust, that we know that God will not allow anything to happen to us that isn't his permission, then it's really, it's not good for us to worry, because it means our faith isn't all that strong. But it's hard not to worry. We get that. And God, there's a verse, I think, in the Psalms that said, God remembers that we are dust. Okay, so the point is, we have the tools, we have the salvation and the way to put on the armor of God and resist the devil so that he'll flee from us. And so, the world is going to be a bad place, and Christians are suffering, have been in some part of the world for as long as there have been Christians. But the point is, this will come to an end, and the deceivers themselves will be deceived. So watch the hidden hand, not the one you can see, but look behind the scenes. And this is, I hope, what I've presented is a way to do that. And you will be better prepared for things, because, as another saying goes, something about it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. So the more knowledge you have, the less anxiety you'll have, because you know who's in control of history, how this is going to play out, and that your soul is safe if you trusted the Jesus who rose from the dead. So let me take a look at the chat here and see what I've been missing. Let's see. Let me shout out names as I go. We got Arwen and Teddy and Martin's, Talbergs and Chow. And let me see. I'll catch up eventually. Elaine, Pillbox, James Mason, Rachel Menifee. Boy, I did get way behind, didn't I? Amanda Young, Michael A. Someone is a bunch of clowns, apparently, according to Michael A. I don't know who he's referring to. Anyway, let's see. Chow's got my version of 2 Timothy 3:6. Thanks for that. Concerned Citizen. Yep, Jesus is still on the throne. He will come back soon. I hope sooner than 5 minutes from now, but what can we do? Anyway, we can all kick the seat and go there. Are we there yet? That's what good children do, right? Let's see. Mark Bailey. And there's more links from Chow. It's also been argued that South... Okay, I think I read that one earlier. Nathan's here. Walter Moss. I think I mentioned you. I don't remember. So they warm together for COVID-19, but also at war. War is a sham. Yes, it is. And so is COVID-19. But, more of the deception. But again, that's the hand we see. What we're not seeing is like what a lot of people didn't see after 9/11. Okay, bunch of clowns. Okay, thanks for clarifying. What a lot of people didn't see after 9/11 was the Patriot Act was the real goal there, the hidden hand thing and the TSA and all that nonsense. And now we've got lockdowns for people who aren't supposed to be prisoners and quarantines for people who are well. It's all right in front of us, but like I said, it's pretty hard to ignore the boiling water at this point. Eyes Wide Shut is here. World War II never ended per se. Yep, they imported the best Nazis here, and it's, of course, ironic, to be kind, but hypocritical really, that the Antifa group is actually the fascist group that they pretend to be against. They are, all their tactics and teachings are fascist, and then of course we have Marxism going on with Black Lives Matter and all that stuff. It's all Marxist and Rules for Radicals from Alinsky and all that. Yep, who controls the past controls the future. Yep, I think that's from 1984, right? Mike Dornan is here. Let's see, who else did I miss? Yeah, everybody should read Animal Farm in 1984. I think I went over those before on some part of some other video I did. Let's see. Constitution. God and Mommy, there you go. Same thing happened in the EU, Dom says. A few years ago, when they passed the European Constitution, so to speak, many countries did not want it. They did it anyway. Yep. And that's, I think, the kind of idea that is being presented in Daniel's 70 weeks about the, or not the 70 weeks, but the statue with the world empires, where the feet of iron mixed with clay don't hold together very well. And that's what they have been trying to do with multiculturalism, is smash people together who can't stay together. And so their alliances are weak. So that's an example. The EU is kind of an example of that, but they're doing the same thing to the US now. Let's see, birth certificate. Let's see. Blue, I don't think I shouted you out either. President Trump knows all this. He's dismantling central bank. I want to believe that. He says the right things, but we need to see some significant action pretty soon, especially before the quote-unquote election. Anyway, try saying 1 Thessalonians after eating a saltine. Yep. Bill Mike says, yep. Let's see. Yes, lots of misdirection, that's for sure. Census of 1860 reported almost 4 million slaves. Okay. But again, it's the number of slave owners is really what I was kind of focusing on. Not how many slaves there were, but how many people owned them. It was actually, not that many people owned slaves. It was not, the whole... I'll try to see if I can find that link and post it later on the video I watched this morning. Let me see if I have that. If I can get this link to come up. I think I have it here. Hold on. Let me put this in the chat. I think that's the video that was talking about American history, and especially blacks in American history. So anyway, go ahead and check that link out. And we see, let's see, AJM is here, and Rhonda. Yep, project, is that paperclip that sent the Nazis to South America, to Argentina. Let's see. Yep, there is still a lot of slavery in the world. Even in Revelation, one of the later chapters talks about Babylon trading in the bodies and souls of people. So human trafficking has never gone away, and yet only American culture is being blamed for slavery, it seems, these days. Let's see. Eyes Wide Shut. The UK also put out adverts to recruit 20,000. I count my zeros right. Police officers. Yeah, well, we'll find out. Let's see. The chat skipped on me. Sorry about that. Yep. Oh, thank you, Nathan. Very nice comment. And any others I missed. I'm sorry if I missed nice comments. I always appreciate those. So it skipped on me, so I went back and saw something else I missed. 9/11 Part 2. Yeah, I mean, all you need is enough complicit, corrupt officials around the world, World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control, all sorts of scapegoats, all sorts of misdirection. He did it, she did it, nobody did it, and, today's truth is yesterday's lie, and on it goes. You see Mark Peterson, Rachel Menifee again. Progressives who supported eugenics, yes, it is eugenics. That's what Planned Parenthood is all about, eugenics. Look up Margaret Sanger if you don't know her name. 9% owned slaves. Yep, 9%. And yet the other 92% get blamed for it all. And as someone pointed out, even North Korea only blames a person's relatives for 3 generations. But here, the Antifa Black Lives Matter group wants to blame for how many generations now? It's just so much hypocrisy. But anyway, thank you also for kind comment, AGM. Not everyone was a slave owner, but 2/3 of the signers. Yeah, so here again, the thing is that not so much that the point is that very few common people were actually racist. That's the point. You know, we could point at any government at any time of history and say, look how evil they were, but what really matters is that the common people, not the elites or anyone like that, are being blamed for racism, and that's the great deception, one of the great deceptions going on right now. Let's see, Barbary Coast pirates went after white Christians centuries ago. Yeah, as I mentioned, I think a couple weeks ago, one of my ancestors was a slave because she and her husband and infant were on a boat across the Atlantic, and the husband and infant died, and so when the woman reached the shore, she was sold as a slave by the ship captain to pay for the trip. So I don't know how they managed to get on the boat in the first place. Maybe you paid part down, I don't know, but she couldn't pay, so she was sold as a slave. And she's a white woman, obviously, in my ancestry, so there you go. Let's see. Anything else? We're getting close to our hour, but it was a lot of material, but like I said, I put the links in there in the chat so you can do your own studies. That's always been my goal online, whether the channel or the blog before it, is to be a resource so that you don't have to spend as much time scouring the internet as I have, because I find stuff that I want other people to see, and they're not going to go find it. Most people aren't. And it doesn't mean I'm better, it just means that this is my thing to do, and so I need to put those together in places that are easier to access. Now, of course, this has happened over so many years that a lot of the old links are dead now, and I can't possibly go back and find them all, but when I see one, I try to fix it. So, yep, controlled opposition, paying for both sides of the war. The real problem, if you wanted to put a dent in the deep state, is to do away with fractional reserve lending and arrest and try and, because of crimes of treason, high treason and crimes against humanity, execute the top players. But go and find the top players. The names you see are probably not the top players. They won't be seen until the restrainer is taken out of the way. So as long as Christians are here, you're not going to find out who the real players are. And again, of course, the absolute top of the evil pyramid is the devil himself, and that's who this is all really against. So yeah, the people who are being blamed are the victims, and what we can do in these very trying times as Christians is to spread the gospel, put on the armor of God, and resist the devil. That's how we deal with it. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't prep. I've gone over prepping before. No, there will not be a squirrel video, I'm sorry, because there's some pretty good ones. If you look on ones like the Ultimate Squirrel, something kind of preventing them from stealing bird seeds, there's some pretty elaborate obstacle courses that people made. Of course, the squirrels always defeat it, no matter how elaborate they are, but they're pretty good videos to watch. Anyway, so if my goal was today with the idea of the squirrel as a distraction was that we need to watch the hidden hand, and we need to pay attention to what's going on, learn some history so we can see better what's going on right now and we don't repeat the mistakes, but understand at the same time, to be realistic, that this is not a war of flesh and blood, and that their tech, even the flesh and blood tech, is so far above what we have that there's no way we're going to take them down by our human power. But that doesn't mean, on the other hand, that some people like to jump to a wild conclusion that somehow we sit and do nothing, that we don't still spread the gospel and stand up for whatever rights we can stand up. knowing that the Constitution was taken away back in 1871 is part of the way that you help understand where you are and what your strategy should be. And again, as Christians, our strategy is to spread this gospel, put on the armor of God, and resist the devil, and spread truth in general. You know, the belt of truth, breastplate of righteousness. These are not just euphemisms. These are real spiritual weapons that we're supposed to have. So study as much sides of history as you can, and if you can't, then don't just wipe it aside when you see something that maybe don't like. Find out why it's wrong, or if it is wrong, and try to see what's happening has happened before. As even back in Solomon's day, he said that there's nothing new under the sun. It's the devil's playbook is just repeated, lather, rinse, repeat, and we keep falling for it. That's why he keeps doing it. And we fall for it because we don't learn lessons. And half the reason we don't learn lessons is we don't even try. You know, and we get we snowed under by the people who think that since so much of history is a lie, then it's all a lie, and we're just going to solve all the world problems by dispensing with history, and that is naive and suicidal. But of course, the other important thing right now in these times, of course, is to have a community of some sort. Because when things go bad, you know, if you're alone, it's a lot harder to deal with. And if anybody had an idea of living someplace where they're self-sufficient, you need to have already put a community in place and have some kind of private army to protect it. Because that's what you would need to even stand a chance against the low to mid-level thugs, be they government or otherwise, who would take it. But when you really think about it, would you want to survive to the end of something that drastic? You know, it's death is, I'm sure, no fun, but if you're a Christian, it's not something to be feared, at least. Yep, that's why it's called revolution. It goes around and around. That's what history is all about. And it's a lesson in the impossibility of the inability of the human race to govern itself, because it wants to go its own way instead of God's way, and God's the designer. And when you try to, you know, jury rig something that doesn't follow the manufacturer's instructions and it doesn't work, you can't blame the manufacturer. But that's what people do. They blame God for how things are messed up, even though they themselves messed it up, and don't want God to bother them. They want two impossible things. They want God to leave them alone, and on the other hand, they want him to micromanage so nothing bad happens, and you can't have both at the same time. So that's all I can think of to say today. It's been an hour. And so, yep, watch dog videos, and not, you know, if you need to tune out for a while and recharge, but at the same time, do what you can and trust God for the rest. That's the best little phrase I can give you. So, anything else I need to address in the chat? I think I got caught up to everything. Let me know if I didn't real quick. Because otherwise, that's all I have today. And thank you. Thanks for everybody coming, and such a nice chat as far as I could see. And try to support Christian communities online or offline, because you may need their help sometime, or, you know, you may be able to help them. That's the way it goes. So thanks again, everybody, and if Jesus doesn't come before then, we'll see y'all next week. Take care.